it gives me great pleasure to welcome our very close friend all the way from the UK, connecting with us today in Cape Town in somewhat a coldish morning. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got Richard Peirce on the line with us. Richard is a radio, TV, and documentary film presenter, is best known as a shark conservationist and former chair of the Shark Conservation Society and Shark Trust. He is a committed environmental activist and has authored several books, including Orca, The Day of the Great White Shark, Disappeared, Giant Steps Elephants, Cuddle Me, Kill Me, Captive Lion Industry, Nicole, Marathon Journey of a Shark, The Poacher's Moon, Rhinos, and his most recent, which we're going to talk about today, is The Pangolins, Scales of Injustice. And all these books have been published by our friends from Straight Nature. Now, we are absolutely honored to have you on the call with us, Mr. Richard. Thank you so much for giving us your time, and we look forward to the presentation. Without any waste of time, the floor is yours, sir. And to everybody else on the call, I will see you guys on the other side of the call. Over to you, sir.
John, thank you very much. And how I live up to that introduction, I don't know, but I'll do my best. Great to see such a kind of eclectic mix of people. So thank you all very much for joining us. Some of you may be familiar with me and the rather mad way I kind of operate. In case you're not, let me prepare you a little. I kind of wave my hands around a lot, so get ready for that. I never know what I'm going to say till after I've said it, so things can get pretty chaotic. And I'm not used to working in a fish tank. I do prefer live performing, but I'll do my best. I've had to do a lot of these over the last year, so I am kind of getting used to it. We're going to talk today about an animal with an absolutely horrendous label. Imagine having the label, the most trafficked mammal on the planet. Absolutely horrible. And that mammal is, of course, the pangolin. In the last 18 months, it's got the added distinction of very probably being the vector that brought COVID-19 from bats to humans. So it's an extraordinarily topical animal in two incredibly unfortunate ways. We're going to look at these pangolins in many ways. The way I do my books is that I tell the true stories of animals, and through telling true stories and making them like adventure stories, I try and get people interested in the animals and at the same time put across conservation and various other messages to try and give them a future. So what we're going to look at today is the true story of an animal called ZAMBEZI. We're going to meet his rescuers, we're going to meet his vets, we're going to meet his carers. And I'm going to start off in a minute by working through a slideshow, and early on in that process will be a film, which is going to show you in pictures much better than I can in words about pangolins. But let's start with some staggering and horrible facts just to colour the way we look at this unfortunate animal. 1 kilo of scales is worth approximately $3,000. In 2019, 97 tons of pangolin scales were illegally shipped out of Africa to Asia. An estimated 1,900 pangolins are killed for every ton of scales. So that 97 tons, that works out to a horrifying 160,000 dead pangolins. Experts believe that only about 10% of these illegal shipments are being intercepted. So if they're right, even I can do the maths, that means at least 1.5 million pangolins leaving the continent of Africa for Southeast Asia every year. So that's the scene setter. We're going to have a little gap as we work through the slides, because when I say next or next slide, then there's going to be a 2 or 3 second gap. Our apologies for that, but there's nothing we can do about it. So next slide, please. Okay, I talked about how I do my books. This is basically a range of my books, all true stories. Nicole is an amazing animal. This is a white shark that swam from Hans Bay to Australia, turned around and swam back. This animal knew exactly where she was going. She was navigating the whole time. She was going in a straight line. And when she was seen again back in South Africa, she was seen 100 meters from where she had been first tagged after that extraordinary journey of thousands and thousands of kilometers in the sea. Then, of course, underneath Nicole, we've got the pangolin book we're going to talk about. Poacher's Moon, as John said, was rhinos, giant steps, obviously elephants, etc., etc. I'll just spend a second on the bottom right slide, which is Cuddle Me, Kill Me. Cuddle Me, Kill Me, I was very delighted, sold very, very well. It seemed to have quite a lot of influence, and it led me to make a film called Lions, Bones and Bullets with colleagues in Cape Town. That film is now finished, and we're in negotiations with various distribution options for the film to be released, which we hope will be sooner rather than later, because many of you may be aware of the extraordinary news on Sunday when Barbara Creasy, the minister, announced the end in South Africa of lion breeding and canned hunting. A hugely important announcement, a very welcome announcement, and we're hoping that our film can get out soon so that it will play its part in keeping the pressure on and the impetus going. Next. So we're going to go through the book after we've seen the film, and the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to go through chapter by chapter the heads and just tell you the story behind the book. Two reasons for doing that. First is I hope you buy the book. The pangolins, need the awareness, and I need the money because I can't even afford to cut my hair nowadays. Actually, that's not true. All the barbers have been shut. So we're going to go through the book after next, please. Okay, this is the film. It's a wonderful film, and it'll really get you into the world of pangolins. Just look at this animal. I don't know why that one's got its front leg on the ground. Normally they're totally bipedal, so the two front legs are up in the air and they walk on the back ones, and the tail acts as a kind of a balancing tool so that they're able to be bipedal. That one does seem to be at the moment be walking on all fours, but there's some wonderful, wonderful images in this presentation, and so I'm going to show you as many as I possibly can. What you're looking at there are scales. You're looking at scales of injustice. You're looking at the reason why perhaps 1.5 million pangolin are being trafficked out of Africa every year. Next. So this is the story of Zambezi. Zambezi was a real animal rescued from the trade. And I'll jump about a bit, as I warned you I would, so you have been warned. I'll explain that little blue thing on this particular animal. When they are being cared for prior to being released, once they've been rescued from the trade, they're taken out on personally supervised walks to secret places, very carefully guarded secret places, and it gets dark. So you need to be able to find the pangolin. So that little blue thing is a little light that flashes the whole time so that the walker who's accompanying the animal knows where it's going and doesn't end up losing it. So let's go on with Zambezi's story. Next slide. You saw in the film a guy called Professor Ray Janssen. Sadly, his voice and the pictures did not sync. Ray, for me as a writer, was an extraordinary gift because he's a complete enigma. I met this guy in Joburg who, and he doesn't mind my saying this, I know, because I've asked him, who's a kind of absent-minded professor, a sort of gangling sort of type. He's a zillion miles away from the sort of 007 gun-toting, secret hero But actually, that's what he is. Ray runs the sting operations, which end up in pangolins being rescued from the trade. So for me as a writer, he was a real gift. I just sat there and interviewed and listened absolutely spellbound while he told me the tale of him, an unlikely hero. And then I rushed back to where we were staying and had to write it all down quickly to make sure that I recorded it all, obviously, but I wanted to write it down to make sure I really captured the essence of this incredible guy who you'll meet in the book. Next. So we start off by introducing you to Ray, and then we move to Matabele land, which is where an awful lot of these animals coming down through, being trafficked down through South Africa, are sourced from. The southern area of Zim is where an awful lot of them are captured. There are particular people who specifically go and find them. Then they're trafficked down in South Africa and then on out to the Far East. This particular bit of the book is fiction, because obviously there was no way I could know a lot about this, but it's fiction entirely based on actuality and fact. And one thing I would stress here is I believe that the bottom run of the ladder with poachers, they're just as much victims of this as the animals they're poaching. Now that may sound weird, but these guys are approached. They're very often hungry. They very often can't buy medicine for their families. They're really, really poor. They're below the poverty line, below anyone's definition of a poverty line. And some guy comes along and flashes a whole lot of money at them. Well, you know, they're going to take it, particularly if they think they can get away with it. So they take the money and they often end up in jail. And those are the guys on the first run of the ladder. The ones I would like to see in jail are the guys on the second, third, fourth, and fifth, and sixth runs, etc., right to the end of the process, who are making all the really big money, while the guys on the bottom runs take the big risks, and they're only doing it because they're desperate. So we've got an animal that's been trafficked. In chapter 3, I introduce you to some very special people, Nikki and Karen, who one is a vet and the other is a rehabilitation specialist. They put together the animals that people like Ray rescue from the trafficking trade. Next. And the next chapter starts the story of Zambezi. Just look at that eye. I keep on being told the eye of a pangolin is special. And for me, there was a big build-up for this because everybody I met talked about the eye. Indeed, Bruce's film is called The Eye of the Pangolin. And I was told it bewitched you, it drew you in, it was magic, da 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 da. So when I met my first pangolin at that veterinary centre you've just seen a picture of, I guess maybe I was expecting too much. I don't know if I was expecting sort of fireworks or the eye to pop out on a stalk and wink at me, or exactly what I was expecting, but it was just an eye. But actually, it wasn't just an eye. And the more I looked at that animal, and the more that animal looked at me, I absolutely understood there is something totally magic about it. It looks through you, into you, around you. It's wise, it's understanding. And you know what? It's forgiving, which is an extraordinary thing. Next. I've got a lot of pictures in this presentation because I mean, they're just such incredible, they're just sweet little guys, aren't they? And that's almost a cheeky, hey, what do you do looking at me kind of look. Next. So this chapter deals with the actuality of what happened in Zambezi's case. He's trafficked down from Zim. He enters South Africa. He enters the trade. He starts being handled. Phone calls are made. Sales are arranged. And Professor Ray gets tipped off and puts together a sting operation. Next. And the sting operation results in Zambezi being recovered. He's not a very well animal at all. So this next chapter deals with his rehabilitation, rest, and recovery. And it's not an exaggeration to say that people like Nikki and Dr. Karen, these animals become their friends, that they get personally attached to them, and they'll always go the extra mile for them. And I think that's true for most of us watching today, for most animals. But there really is something special about these ones. Next. We're back to the eye again. He's obviously had his head in a termite mound or down an ant hole or something. We're talking about a massively long tongue that comes out, and it's kind of coated in sticky stuff. So when it pokes its tongue into an ant hole or into a termite mound, it comes out coated in ants, which then proceed to crawl around all over the place, as well as being taken down into the stomach on the tongue. And then your eyes, your ears, your everything get full up with ants. Pretty sort of messy way to feed, really, but pangolins seem to enjoy it. Next. So we've got Zambezi. He's been trafficked. He's been rescued. He's been looked after. He's met the very worst and the very best in humans. And then he gets released. And he gets released onto the Pindar Reserve. And what was fabulous about this, the Pindar Reserve down in KwaZulu-Natal, what was fabulous about this is that Zambezi and other pangolins being released there actually was the return of pangolins to an area in which they'd become locally extinct. In the pic there is Simon Naylor, who's the manager of the reserve, and who played a big part, perhaps the biggest part, in the actual management and release of Zambezi and others who are successfully living there. Sadly, any release is going to have the occasional victim for various reasons, and one or two haven't made it that have been released, but Zambezi has, and he's living very well, very happily, and enjoying life back in an area which his kind had left many decades ago. Next. So I did warn you, I just can't resist these pictures because they're such brilliant pictures. What's relevant about this one, I guess, is look to the left. Look to those bits of human electronics bolted to this animal. This is what enables the research and the tracking to happen. This is what enables the telemetry to find the animal, and it also transmits signals up to satellites so that the animal's actual track can be recorded all the time. So this is how they're sort of studied to a very large degree, and this is how conservation will go forward. It's a funny sort of dilemma, really. I often think that animals are entitled to their secrets, and who are we to spend our time and our money and everything else just for the sake of PhDs and God knows what, to enter their world and discover their secrets? Aren't they allowed to have their secrets? Of course, it is a dilemma because we need to know their secrets. We need to know their lifestyles in order to have effective conservation. So those kind of tools are very, very important in conservation and research. Next. So after telling the story of Zambezi, I went to Swalu, up in southern Kalahari, which is a major station, a major place for pangolin research. Indeed, it's now got a reputation for being one of the best places in the world to give you a chance of seeing pangolins, and people do come from all over the world to see them. The research is headed by a fabulous woman called Wendy Penana. That's her there, waving an aerial around looking for a pangolin. You also saw rather sort of gibbery pictures of Wendy in the film that didn't work terribly well, I'm sorry, but she is a leading researcher, fabulous person. She lives and breathes these animals, and unashamedly tells you when you meet her that she arrived in Swalu sort of, if you like, almost one person, and subsequently pangolins have taken over her life. She's got some wonderful, wonderful stories to tell, and people like her are the way this animal can have a future. Next. One of the wonderful things about Wendy is that she's often called upon to help the rangers find animals, find pangolins for people who've come to Swalu to see them. It's got this worldwide reputation now for being a fantastic place to see pangolins, And Wendy, of course, is tracking them the whole time to study them. So if the guides can't, for whatever reason, find them or don't know where there is one or whatever, they often get in touch with Wendy and ask for her help. So Wendy's got some brilliant stories of people who've traveled around the world to come to Swalu to fulfill a life ambition to see pangolin. I'm not going to spoil her stories by telling you too much about them, but there's a couple of very, very moving stories in there of people who came all the way from a long way away to see pangolin. One of them possibly was almost an end of life story. For this person, they were traveling all this distance to achieve an end of life desire. So fabulous stories from Wendy in that chapter. Next. There's no real reason for that photo, guys, other than I thought it was a really good photo. I take some of the pictures for my books. My wife, Jackie, takes most of them. I'm not particularly brilliant. Jackie's much better. But I put that photo in because I just think it's such a brilliant photo. It's got light, it's got shade, it's got drama, it's got etc., etc., etc. So I stuck it in, and I think it's also a little bit of a tribute to the person, to Wendy. Next. Now, part 3, the book's in 4 parts. Part 3 moves us to China and Southeast Asia. This is the bit that you may or may not be aware of it. This is the bit that has touched your life in the last 18 months because COVID-19 came from Wuhan in Southeast Asia. So it's very much in all of our lives. Next. I went there primarily for our film Lions, Bones and Bullets to Laos and to Vietnam. But the side issue was also to find out what I could and do whatever research I could and do whatever work I could on pangolins. And it was a pretty horrific experience. I'm a Westerner, clearly. I was posing as being on holiday. So I had no special introductions, no special knowledge. And I was going into shops and able to find pangolin scales freely on sale. Now, this is pretty appalling stuff because countries like Laos and Vietnam have signed up to CITES, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. CITES puts animals on Appendix 1, 2, 3, etc., which gives them various levels of restriction in trade and protection. And these countries are simply ignoring what they've signed up to. If I could go to shops and freely buy, and restaurants, we'll come to that in a minute, and freely buy pangolin bits without any special introductions, there was no secret stuff, there was no sort of nose tapping or pulling of ears or code words. I just walked in and I was offered pangolin scales. If I can do that, if I can see it, so can the police. I went with my colleagues on the film to a place in Laos where in one very small area, one cluster of shops, we were shown pangolin scales, we were shown tiger wine, which might easily have been lion-based wine. We were shown other tiger products, we were shown rhino products, and it's all sitting there for anybody to see in the shop window. So what are the police doing? Answer, they're looking the other way. Hence, this chapter was called Ineffective and Ignored because it describes CITES, which in my view really needs overhauling so that it becomes effective and can't be ignored when it passes laws. Next. Here's some shots that were actually shot when I was in Laos and Vietnam on the film. Perhaps the most interesting one is on your left. You can see 2 guys chopping something up, and I'm peering at what they're chopping up. What they're chopping up actually is a civet. Some of you may be aware, and I'm going to come back to this in a minute in a different context, that civets were the probable vector for the first SARS epidemic in 2002, 2003. What we're in at the moment is the second SARS one. In the first one, civets were the likely vector. These, as I said, are all shots from the film Lions, Bones and Bullets. Interesting one there, bottom left, actually. There are tiger products and tiger wine. What else have we got? Tiger wine on the left, one down from the top. Those bottles are tiger wine. Completely illegal according to the international conventions these countries have signed up to. Actually, there's quite a few interesting ones here. I can see one there of a wet market. Most of you know all about wet markets, or you've come to know about them since this COVID-19 thing. That market there that you can see second down in the first column on the right, that sold absolutely everything that you can think of animal-wise. Let me try and come up with a few. It had pigeons, it had frogs, it had snakes, it had fish, it had chickens, it had rabbits, it had little baby pigs, it had lizards, almost anything that sort of was in the animal kingdom. And we were told that the legal stuff was on top of the tables, and the exotics like pangolin, like civets, they're under those tables, so they are not so easily seeable. Next. So this chapter looks really at COVID-19. I was in Swalu, where we've just been with Wendy, when someone came across, very excited, a guy called Barry Lovegrove came across, another author, by the way, came across, and the news had just broken on February the 8th, 2020, that pangolins had been identified as the likely vector, that's transmission agent, for COVID-19 to get to humans. And the pangolin in question was the Malayan pangolin, which is one of 4 Asian species. And what had happened is that a huge match, 90-something% match had been achieved between COVID-19 and between Malayan pangolins. So what we think happened is that bats to pangolins to humans. On the left of this shot here, you can see wire cages. These wire cages in these wet markets are stacked one on top of the other. So let's just say you've got bats on the top. You could have civets or pangolins underneath, and then et cetera, et cetera. So poo and pee and stuff from the bat cages goes down, could affect the pangolins or the civets. Alternatively, when these animals are killed, when they've been bought, they're just taken out and put on a block of wood and chopped up. We witnessed this in Laos and Vietnam. It's pretty unhygienic. Those blocks of wood are not cleaned properly. So if you've got raw meat from one animal or from a bat or something, and then another animal comes along and that's chopped up, things can very easily transmit from raw meat to raw meat. So there's pretty compelling scientific evidence that this COVID-19 thing came from bats to Malayan pangolins to humans. This makes it one of the most, probably the most expensive meal that will ever be eaten by any human in the history of the world. This is literally a sort of trillion, billion, zillion, willion, whatever the hell, dollar meal. It's got to stop. So next slide, please. That is the Chinese National People's Congress. This is where China's laws are made. Once the Wuhan COVID-19 thing broke, and once in February, people had started speculating that it might have come from pangolins, etc. We always knew it probably came from a wet market. Pangolins were the new bet at that time. Then we all hoped that China would do something about curtailing and stopping their consumption of wildlife. They are, I believe, I'm not sure if they're the biggest or second biggest nation on the planet, but an awful lot of Chinese people, an awful lot of middle-class ones, an awful lot of ones able to consume delicacies and other things that they believe have medicinal uses. So if the Chinese would modify and hopefully just stop their consumption of wildlife, it would go a massive way to stopping future outbreaks, future pandemics, but also to saving Africa and other continents' wildlife. So we hope that those guys you can see there, the Chinese National People's Congress, would pass laws. The whole of last year, they were in a consultative process looking at their wildlife laws, and we hope that consultative process would end with very clear-cut changes to laws outlining the farming of wildlife and the selling and consumption of wildlife. The word changes, but not enough, not clear enough, and there are still loopholes. So I wouldn't say we're 100% back to square one, but we're not all that far away from it. I hope that that doesn't mean we're going to have to learn an even harder lesson than we're learning at the moment in the future. I regard this once again as just being irresponsible. You know, here we've got consumers consuming something which is affecting the whole world in a major way. And I don't know what the death toll to humans from COVID-19 is, but it's traceable directly back to an animal disease getting to humans. So anyway, next slide, please. And the next. So part 4 brings us back largely to Africa and talks about the pangolin's place in history and symbolism, and about its biology and about its conservation. It shows you the 8 species, the 4 African species and the 4 Asian species. These are always the parts that I hope are sort of, in a way, most meaningful in my books, because by now I hope that the reader is really into the animal and ready for the hard stuff, if you like, the conservation stuff and all the other stuff. So that's what normally the final part of my book is. What you're seeing there is a woman. Where is she? She's in West Africa somewhere, probably Cameroon or somewhere, I think. Anyway, she's cooking a pangolin in a bushmeat market. Next. We're back to that horrifying title, aren't we? The most trafficked mammal in the world. So this chapter is in the final part, and this just talks about the hard facts of pangolin trafficking, the numbers involved, who's involved, etc., etc. Next. And of course, the future. What we might do to stop this. It's got to stop. Look, I've got to be an optimist, because if I wasn't an optimist doing what I do, I would wake up in the morning, go and find a piece of rope and a tree and hang myself, because sometimes it feels as if you're making no progress at all. But I'm an optimist, so I don't. And every now and again, amazing things happen. Last Sunday, the minister in South Africa, Barbara Creasy, announced that her department was going to move forward to banning captive breeding of lions, to banning canned hunting, etc., etc. We all know it's not going to happen in 5 minutes. It's going to be a fight, etc., etc. But nobody was really seriously expecting that 2 weeks ago. So those kind of events give people like me huge boosts and huge optimism to carry forward. So we leave the piece of rope in the drawer and don't bother looking for the tree. So chapter 14 is all about the future for pangolins. Have they got a future? You need to read chapter 14 to find out. Next. This is just me really being a little cynical. Pangolins appeared on the earth about 80 million years ago. They started appearing in Africa, on the continent of Africa, about 40 million years ago. And I just thought, hey, I just imagined 2 pangolins outside a cave, and inside the cave is some rock art and depicting human life on Earth. And one pangolin is looking at the rock art and saying to the other pangolin, as you can read, they didn't last long, did they? And that's a very valid point, because actually, compared to these guys, compared to rhinos, compared to most, lots of species like that, we've literally been on Earth 5 minutes. 40 million years versus 200,000. So we're the new kids on the block. And right now, guys, we're doing an excellent job of messing up everybody else's life on the block. But look, we're going to get there. You know, there's no point in me being all doom and gloom the whole time. As I've said, I wouldn't be fighting my fights. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if I didn't believe we could get there. We can get there. And all of you watching today can play a part in getting there. Next. So that's the front cover of the book. the book that I hope some of you will buy, and the book that I hope makes a contribution in giving these very beleaguered, little understood animals a future. Look at the eye of the pangolin. Next. We must be getting near the end. What does this say? Thanks for joining us. And it says that you can buy a book with a discount, which is fantastic. So perhaps you'd all like to rush off and buy 2 or 3 books. That would be even better. And John's up on the screen now. I can see John. So John's coming back in. My wife just bought me a cup of coffee. So I'm going to hand you to John for a second. I'm going to move 1 meter that way and pick my coffee up. John, hi.
Richard, thank you so much. What an amazing, fantastic talk you've just given us. I'm just lost for words. Some of the pictures that you've shared with us, absolutely appalling. But I think the value of your work is, the best value of any empirical research is leaving the reader with more questions. And I think that's what you've done today. You've left us with so many questions. You've left us with so many emotions and feelings and a call for action. And you've done a fantastic work. This is excellent, excellent work. And no matter how frustrating it must be for you, I can assure you that even for individuals like myself that are learning about the topic for the first time, I don't even know where to begin. In fact, looking at all the comments that are coming in on the chat, some of them I don't think I want to read, but I think everybody that's on the call today is just, for lack of a better word, we're just upset. And beyond being upset, the wonderful way in which you've packaged the information, the way you've put together the research, is absolutely fantastic. And I think everybody that's on the call today will definitely be able to read more about the pangolins and all the beautiful research that have been put in the book. So please make sure to get yourself a copy. Straight Nature, go to their website page, go to Straight Nature Facebook page, make sure you like the page, make sure you get yourself a copy, make sure you get a copy for a friend, and make sure we spread this word, because unless we take action, not much will be done. Let me take a couple of quick questions while we have you on the line before we close the session. We've got a couple of questions, and I'm going to start with Anita's question, who says, has the presumed idea that the pangolin is a vector of COVID caused the pangolin to be in a more dire situation as people may seek to kill it for this reason, or has it assisted in preservation of the pangolin?
That is an incredibly good question, and I just want to take a few minutes to answer that, because that is of huge importance. There is already evidence that bats are being persecuted because of the perception that they're bringing the coronaviruses to humans. So pangolins, in that sense, probably won't be getting a sympathetic hearing from the kind of people who think the answer is to kill things. My experience with sharks is interesting. As soon as there's a shark attack somewhere, even though a shark was doing what sharks have been doing for tens of millions of years, is get out, hunt it, kill it. That seems to be a human reaction to a lot of things. So there is a danger that pangolins will not be getting a sympathetic hearing as a result of being held to be the culprits. The other way to look at it, of course, is that there have been some pluses. Vietnam, for example, have put in very robust laws governing the consumption of wildlife. What we want to see is whether they implement and police those laws. So there's a big plus there. My real fear for pangolins in Africa, however, is something totally different. The United Nations thinks that as a result of this pandemic, the starvation in Africa will increase a lot. Now, that means more pressure on the bushmeat trade. That means more pressure on animals like pangolin and others. So I'm hoping that that is not going to be a really sort of negative side effect of this, but it just might be. But all these things, that was a very, very good question. And what we've got to hope for, is that this pandemic will change the way we go forward on this planet. Now, if it achieves that, and if pangolins were the vector, well done, pangolins. You've actually talked some sense.
All right, so we've got a couple of questions. I'm not going to take all of them, but for the sake of having spoken about other books earlier on, I want to take Leslie's question. He says, Leslie, I know this presentation is on pangolins, but referring back to lions, Cuddle Me, Kill Me book, there is a concern that by stopping the captive lion breeding, then wild lions will be targeted instead. Can you comment just a little bit on that? And the only reason I'm asking this question is because of, I think you've got a very good wide range of books out there, and I'd like to encourage everybody on the call to, to consider all the books that are out there. Yes, over to you, sir.
That's another great question. That has always been a concern. But what is the facts now, the science now is starting to actually show exactly the opposite. And that is that what captive breeding is doing is it's creating a market for lion products. And the bone trade and trinket value, teeth, claws, etc., etc. So if by breeding lions you create a market for the products, what then happens is that the poaching of wild lions increases. And so there is starting now to be properly researched scientific evidence to show that the increase in the demand for lions, which comes as a direct result of breeding lions, is negatively impacting the wild population. So it's the opposite. We needed to get to that point to be able to prove it, which is now increasingly the case. And that is one of the main reasons why Minister Creasy, I think, came to the conclusion she did, because the reason South Africa got its dispensation to export skeletons to the Far East was because they were coming from a captive population, which did not impact on a wild population. But now that the proof is being that it is impacting on wild lions, and wild lion numbers are hugely decreased. Nobody knows, but I've heard estimates that there's only between 14 and perhaps 21, 22,000 left on the whole continent. So these guys are also under massive threat. And I think the minister's recent move will give them a boost.
Sure. No, without any waste of time, we've got fantastic questions. For the sake of time, I'm not going to take any questions, but I'd like to just share with everybody that's on the call this morning that this session has been recorded. All the questions have been captured. We will actually share, if it's okay with you, Mr. Richard, I would like to share some of the questions with you. If maybe in one sentence or two, if you could just comment if at all possible. And what we will do is we will upload this video and then post it on our Facebook page, on the Kirstenbosch National Botanical Facebook page, as well as the Straight Nature Facebook page, together with all the questions and comments that everybody has kind of included on this call today. And I think that will be one of the easiest ways to manage our time for now. And I knew that this topic that we're having today is going to be very engaging and really get everybody excited and really wanting to get involved. And it's exactly what's happening. All the comments, everybody is shouting, thank you for the work that you're doing. Keep on the good work that you're doing. Some of the comments that I'm seeing here, excellent, well-written, researched book. And yeah, just the general frustration that everybody's feeling in terms of what's happening. A lot of the questions that are coming asking, what is South Africa doing in terms of make sure that we mitigate against this problem that we're having in wildlife, species that we're having. Some of the questions again related to COVID-19. So lots of comments, lots of questions. And I think that's how we started. We said the value of great empirical research leaves the listener or the reader with more questions. And it's only because we want to take action. And thank you so much for the work that you do. We are absolutely blessed to have somebody like you who champions the causes and activism of conservation like you do. So thank you very much, sir. May you please stay protected, and we look forward to engaging with you more on other topics and hopefully just catching up about the documentary. One last thing before I pull you back in, I just want to let everybody that's on the call, please make sure that you Google lions, bones, and bullets. Also go and check out this amazing documentary on YouTube about the video that we watched earlier on. I think it's absolutely fantastic and you will love it. Make sure you watch it with your friends, your family. Get yourself this book and make sure you get your friend a book as well.